Now, while I don't believe in giving caveats before I speak, let's call this a disclaimer. I did have a different sermon written, but then, like I said in the video, sometimes life intervenes. So just so you know, I was going to give you something kind of light and fluffy and happy. Not fluffy. I never give fluffy sermons. But it was going to be like a little feel good. And then, things happen, you got to reroute. So here we are. Anyway, back to the script, or the hasty outline. Shabbat Shalom. Being a rabbi, my life is a little unusual compared to, the rest of you. Not you. Or you. Most people look forward to, Thursday, Friday, right? TGIF, the weekend's coming up, right? And look, I'm happy for y'all, but your week is winding down. By midweek, I'm just ramping up. People hate Mondays, right? The Monday blues, case of the Mondays. But little secret, clergy love Mondays. Because for most of us, Rabbi Rosen, too, Mondays are our one day off all week. So we love Mondays. I hated Mondays until I started working as a rabbi. And now, favorite day all week. Another difference I noticed is that predominantly now, and this one is a mixed blessing, as a rabbi, my days are filled with Jews. I work with almost all Jews. I work for almost all Jews. I preach and teach Jewish texts and traditions. My son goes to Jewish day school. All your kids are Jewish. Most of the other parents are Jewish. All the friends I've made since becoming a rabbi are all Jews. In fact, when I really thought about it, I can go days without having any meaningful interaction with a non-Jewish person. This is not by design, by the way. I didn't plan my life to look this way. It was not intentional. Like many of you now, I used to have a very diverse group of friends. Growing up, I didn't even really know any non-Jews. My friends were all different races and religions. I really enjoyed being exposed to different cultures and traditions. I had a lot of Indian friends as a kid, but some were Hindu, some were Muslim, some were Christian. They were all Indian. That was fascinating to me. I had Chinese friends who were devout atheists, and others who were observant churchgoers. I had Catholic friends who came in all hues, from all backgrounds. I remember watching like a ping pong match, a geopolitical argument, a vicious one, between a Pakistani Muslim friend of mine and an Indian Muslim friend. And I was so confused because I was like, but aren't you the same? Oh, no, they were not. As an Indian and a Pakistani, they had a lot to argue about. So while now, my day-to-day life is very Jewy, I would say that historically, my life used to look a lot more like yours. In fact, Jews, in general, have spent the majority of our millennia of existence living surrounded by non-Jewish people. We have learned to live with them side by side. Harmony is an integral part of Judaism. Courteousness is our byword. It's built in for us. In our text, the Talmud taught 2,000 years ago, Ein mumchim biyad, anechem nochrim beleket. One does not protest against poor Gentiles who come to glean the forgotten produce of our fields. You're supposed to leave the produce behind from your harvest and such. You're supposed to leave it behind for poor Jewish folks. So why don't you protest when non-Jewish folks take it? Well, the Talmud tells us, mipnei darchei shalom, on account that this is the way of peace. That yes, we should prioritize feeding our hungry, but we must not get in the way of feeding others. And the Talmud actually goes further, mifarnasim enechim nochrim im enechei shalom, enechei Yisrael. One sustains poor Gentiles along with poor Jews, the Gemara continues. One visits sick Gentiles along with sick Jews. One buries dead Gentiles as well as dead Jews. Why? Mipnei darchei shalom, on account that this is the way of peace. That the way we forge peaceful relations with the non-Jewish majority we are surrounded by is by showing them courtesy, decency. Interfaith work, you could say, is a very Jewish value, an important Jewish value. But, someone said to me recently, there's always a but with you, Rabbi, so I can't disappoint you. But What happens when our interfaith imperative butts up against our deeply held Jewish fundamentals, our values, our core morals? What if in pursuit of peace with all the children of God, something we're supposed to work towards as Jews, what if that goal runs into a wall, and that wall appears to be our core beliefs, our needs? Which one's gonna win? Now, it may seem like it should be an easy answer, but I learned, like 48, 72 hours ago, that even for the most passionate Jews and ardent Zionists, when confronted with the discomfort or displeasure of some non-Jewish folks, choosing Jewish values, core beliefs, needs, over keeping the peace and maintaining the status quo is not a given. I was surprised and disappointed this week to learn from a friend of mine just before I made national and then international news in a community that I used to live and work in. And I'm not talking about anybody here. This didn't happen in Houston or Texas or even in the Central Time Zone, so get that out of your head. I learned something very surprising and disappointing. Honestly, I didn't even believe her when she told me what happened. It seemed so out of left field. But just a few days ago, at a conservative synagogue in a fairly Jewish area, they had lent space to a local mosque to use during Ramadan as an overflow space because they have larger than usual crowds. It's like high holidays. This in and of itself is not a problem. Plenty of synagogues, especially the smaller ones, let their space to other religious groups. Many of our buildings stand empty on certain days of the week, and it's a little extra income for those shuls too. And knowing the rabbis of that community, and the extensive Christian and Muslim interfaith work that they do, I was not surprised to hear that they would lend a hand to a local mosque, especially during such a fraught time between our people. I was surprised and deeply disappointed to hear that somebody or somebodies in the synagogue leadership, and it's not clear who, took an initiative upon themselves. This was not a request from the mosque, but someone in the leadership took it upon themselves that when the mosque came to use the space for the first time, decided to cover the posters of the hostages in the shul out of sensitivity for their guests' triggers. But wait, there's more. Because one of the speakers on the first, and ended up being the only night, was the executive director of their local chapter of CARE, who was invited by the mosque as a respected voice in the community, who happens to also hold a certain belief, who has been quoted saying, when speaking about Israel's right to defend herself, "Imagine telling Nazi Germany you have the right to defend yourself against Jewish resistance. People would laugh at you if you said that." This man literally compared Israel to Nazi Germany and Hamas to Jewish resistance fighters. And this was not years and years ago, this was in December. And when asked to comment on the uproar, he doubled down, saying under international law, Israel is an occupier, it's not an opinion. Can you imagine such a man speaking at a shul? Can you imagine such a man speaking at our shul? Can you imagine covering up the posters of the 136 still held hostage by Hamas and their compatriots 5 months later, just because seeing the hostages might make some people a little uncomfy? In public spaces all over the world and throughout this country, from New York to Harvard Yard to Los Angeles, the one place those posters should be safe and respected and left in peace should be in our communal Jewish houses. It was shocking to me on a personal level and on a professional one as well. Like I said, I know those rabbis. I respected those rabbis. Those are rabbis who take their Judaism seriously. They have always been steadfast supporters of Israel. That community I know very well. They've also been likewise. The uproar from the community in recent days has been deafening. The co-presidents have already resigned. Because it's shocking that any synagogue, any Jewish group would kowtow to the apparently delicate sensibilities of certain visitors to their space who might be offended at the reminder that there are mostly Jewish civilians held hostage right now. The elderly and the infirm, teenage girls, a literal baby. And so you have to ask, you ask yourself instinctively, how was such a decision made? That covering up the posters of the hostages, that inviting a known Jew hater into a synagogue space seemed like the more correct course of action. How was such a decision made? And I have to wonder if it's not, in some form or fashion, actually a kind of decision that many of us face, if not now, then at some point in the course of our lives, when our desire to be amenable and palatable to the outside world comes into direct conflict with our own beliefs and morals and values. I don't think this is actually very uncommon. So when our desire to keep peace, to reach out the olive branch to our non-Jewish friends and neighbors, family sometimes even, comes into direct conflict with our love for Jews and Judaism and Jewish values, and in those moments, those agonizingly tempting moments when decisions must be made, one can, like the synagogue in the news, actually end up siding against themselves. I say it's tempting because does not the psalmist sing, Bekesh shalom ve'odfehu, seek peace and pursue it? We Jews are built to seek peace. War and conflict are always a last resort for us. There is a reason Makat Bechorot, the death of the firstborn, is the 10th, the final plague in the Passover story. That even when the pursuing Egyptians were drowning in the sea, the Midrash teaches the angels began to sing, and it incensed God, who rebuked them swiftly, saying, "Those are my children down there dying." It had to happen, but it was not to be celebrated. All we Jews want is to live in peace, side by side with our non-Jewish neighbors. So it is, in that way, understandable that some would make the error in judgment that was made at that synagogue. The intention, we must believe, we must hope, was pure, and they are now taking steps to correct. But it is a grave reminder for all of us that there is a danger in making such a judgment call, that when, even in the pursuit of peace, we forsake our beliefs and our morals, when in the name of making and maintaining friends, we sacrifice our integrity. Because what does it tell those who hold different values than we? If our most fundamental beliefs, the right of the innocent to be free of bloodshed, the right of Jews to simply be alive, what does it tell those who watch us sell out our integrity in the pursuit of their acceptance? It tells them that our values are not valuable, that our moral foundation is not fundamental, that in exchange for a pat on the head, we will forsake our own brothers and sisters. As Jews, we believe that almost no price is too high to pay for peace. Almost no price. But if the price for peace is our integrity and our fellow Jews, we cannot afford it. I know, even as a rabbi surrounded by Jews pretty much 24/7, I know it's hard being a Jew in the greater world today, as in all days in the past. We are sometimes at odds with our friends, coworkers, fellow students, even family members. And that is a particularly sharp pain, because while we can turn off the TV and stop scrolling the news on our phones, there's a reason that the writer Jean-Paul Sartre said, excuse our French, hell is other people. And despite, or maybe because of that, loosening or damaging our ties with other people wounds our very souls. Compromise is such an important Jewish value. Peace between the family of nations, a critical Jewish pursuit. But you cannot break yourself down into bite-sized chunks to appease those who would consume you. To loosely quote the writer Florence Given, and I say this with all due respect: don't make yourself smaller to make yourself easier to digest. Stay whole and let them choke. Shabbat Shalom.